because it does not return the land that was stolen by them back into their hands. That will never happen. The land reclamation program is irreversible. The land that was taken back to the Zimbabwean people will never be reversed. And so therefore, we want to make this statement to the people. Come out, 12 o'clock, Saturday, May 25th. We will assemble right here on this plaza, a historical plaza, where Africans in the Civil War fought for their own freedom. No one gave it to them. And now we want to hear from one of the foremost international human rights lawyers, one of our attorneys, Attorney Roger Waring.
Good afternoon. It's important for people to understand that the United States imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe nearly 20 years ago. The so-called Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, signed into law, proposed by the notorious racist senator from North Carolina, Jesse Helms, and co-sponsored by then Senator Hillary Clinton, provided a legal basis for illegal sanctions. Zimbabwe was being and is being punished for exercising its right to self-determination. The Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act and the amendment to the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, which was signed into law by President Trump just a week after Zimbabwe held elections in 2018, continue that policy of illegal sanctions. These are violations of international law. These are violations of the United Nations Charter. It's the interference by a country in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. Everyone recognizes that except the United States. So that's why we are here to demand that the United States recognize international law, that the United States observe international law, that the United States is not an entity unto itself above international law, and that President Trump and the administration lift the sanctions, begin negotiations with the government of Zimbabwe, which over the past year and a half has engaged in several strides to demonstrate that democracy has been restored. Democracy was never an issue in Zimbabwe. The elections that occurred in July of 2018, I was part of an observer team there. The elections were conducted in a manner which were fair and free. All parties were there at each of the polling stations to participate and to demonstrate that it was fair and free. And in fact, the elections in Zimbabwe are fairer and freer than what happens here in the United States. So we want to reiterate that what's happened, the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act and its amendment are violations of international law. That the United States, no matter what it says, is subject to that and needs to observe that. Thank you.
This is our sister Iman Essex of our youth committee and part of the Friends of Zimbabwe in December 12th.
And let us be clear that the sanctions on Zimbabwe are being used as a weapon of mass destruction. Again, the sanctions on Zimbabwe are being used as a weapon of mass destruction, all because the Zimbabwean people dared to do what no other African country has ever done, and that is liberate themselves and take back the land that the European colonizers have stolen from them. And because of this, the United States wants to place immoral sanctions upon Zimbabwe, and we must think about the millions and millions of people whose lives are being destroyed because of the immoral sanctions. Medical supplies are not being allowed into the country. They're not able to trade, and their economy is being attacked because of these sanctions, and the development of the people is being destroyed. So we must take a stand. That is why we are calling on the CBC to take a position. The Congressional Black Caucus must take a position when we are talking about our brothers and sisters on the continent. Their lives are being destroyed because of the immoral sanction. Millions and millions of youth lives are being destroyed. I saw a few a few months ago that they wanted to talk about this whole issue of Clear, which is a drug that the youth are turning to, and they're turning to this to suppress the oppression caused by the sanctions. So if we are really human beings, and if we really are black people who want to fight for the liberation of black people, then we must take a stand, and we must fight for the lifting of the immoral sanctions that are being placed on a people who dared to liberate themselves. And they have a right to be self-determined. They have a right because they are a sovereign nation.
Next we'll hear from Brother Salim Adolfo, the chair of the DC chapter of the National Black United Front.
Greetings. Thank you all for the opportunity to come and speak on behalf of the National Black United Front, as well as District ACO 7, which I've been elected to be commissioner of. The fight in Zimbabwe is the same fight that's going on here, for a fight of self-determination, self-respect, and self-defense of our community. We must be able to connect with some of the younger folks on the ground here to get them to understand that our struggle is an international struggle. The same things that they're doing over there to them, they're doing over here to us, and vice versa. And until we can get that connection with our young people here to understand that they have a responsibility to our ancestors and to our elders to continue on this legacy, then we'll have a generation that's lost. This just did not happen a couple of days ago, brothers and sisters. This just didn't happen last week when the first African was kidnapped and taken hostage and brought to America. That's when this fight began. And these sanctions are a continuation of that. Our sisters and brothers need to be able to have the right to self-determination. They need to be able to have the right to grow their own food. They need to be able to have the right to have their own gross national domestic product, to be able to do trade and commerce without the sanctions of the United States prohibiting that. They need to be able to build their own institutions. And until we can get the Congressional Black Caucus to be on the ground to stand in solidarity with our sisters and brothers, we'll have to continue to come out here and fight all the time, every day, and keep pounding the pavement and go door to door and talk to our sisters and brothers and get them to understand that we must organize, we must organize, we must organize. And if we're going to have elected officials need to be here in support of their sisters and brothers, not just here, but also abroad, because this struggle is an international struggle. The reason why we're able as elected officials to be in this position is because of the fight that sisters and brothers had, not just here, but worldwide. And that connection was definitely made strong by one of our strongest ancestors, Brother Malcolm X, who showed us the connection between the international struggle and the local struggle. So I'm encouraging all our sisters and brothers to get on social media, to spread this word, and to be out here. If we want to put something on Snapchat and Instagram, let's make sure we put that we want the Congressional Black Caucus to stand up against the sanctions against Zimbabwe, and to tell the Trump administration that we want to organize and we want to sit down and have some negotiations on behalf of the sisters and brothers in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
We'll now take questions from the media that's present.
What's the game plan as far as approaching Representative Bass, given that she's the leader of the CBC? At any time in this protest, is there any consideration of perhaps going up there to her office and talking to her or a staff member?
Absolutely. This press conference was in fact to announce a plan and a strategy to bring our communities together and certainly point the CBC towards these unfair, illegal, and anti-human sanctions that are being put on Zimbabwe. And so the leadership of the CBC, those dealing with foreign policy, those dealing with other issues of domestic policy, we want to organize them and first educate them. That's why one of our demands is you can't make policy, you can't pass legislation or rebuke legislation unless you have the information, which is why one of our demands for the CBC is that they call members of the Zimbabwe government to come and have hearings and let them ask the people of Zimbabwe what's going on. Let them explain what the nature of sanctions are. Sometimes we don't control our own communities and don't really understand what sanctions actually do and how insidious they are. It denies a country its ability in terms of international trade. It manipulates the currency of a country to devalue it. It also comes at things that you don't really necessarily think of. The supply of chemicals, fertilizer, medical supplies. the cholera epidemic that went on in Zimbabwe. They never had cholera in Zimbabwe. But not only was it a direct result of being hindered from the products that in terms of take care sanitation, but now that cholera is there, the medical supplies to treat people. These are all insidious attacks on the people. And so the CBC, yes, we're going to step to the CBC. We've stepped to the CBC before. But after 2 decades of sanctions against Zimbabwe, the people of Zimbabwe are a shining example of what unity does. Because in spite of all of the blows Zimbabwe has endured, in spite of all of the insidious ways that they want to deal with regime change, Zimbabwe is an example of the kind of unity we need to have in our community, the kind of unity we need to have with our legislators. And we need to come back in the spirit of Ron Dellums, the spirit of Charles Diggs, that, you know, we have to have a policy for black people at home and abroad that speaks to our unity. One of the greatest weapons that Steve Biko said was that to have the mind, the oppressor have your mind in his hands. That's one of the greatest. Yes, so we will be talking to the CBC. Yes, yes.
All right. Peace and Black Power. My name is Jade Arrindell. I'm here representing Fly Nubian Queen Network, the network for melanated women and men like you. I have a lot of people, our people don't know about these sanctions. And thank you for going in and explaining exactly what sanctions do. But I want to know the impact that these sanctions, these illegal sanctions on Zimbabwe are having on the continent of Africa as a whole and the diaspora as a whole.
One of the things that the sanctions have done has been the fact that Zimbabwe's economy at one time, and let me give you an example. When I first went to Zimbabwe, and it was 1999, $1 US was to 37 Zim dollars. They destroyed the Zimbabwe financial system. At one point in time, $1 was almost worth 10 million Zim dollars, and then it was destabilized the country where they had to shift over to the US dollar, in fact, to stabilize the economy. And so the impact that has ripples effect around the rest of Africa in terms of their unity and currency. The other question is, a very important one, is what's happening in South Africa right now. In South Africa right now, land is on the agenda. In Namibia right now, land is on the agenda. Africa, 90% of the people in Africa are in the rural areas. 90% of the people in Africa are dealing with agriculture and stuff. So land is fundamental to development. In fact, the World Bank recently came out with a report that it is impossible for a developing country to develop without being in control of its land. They don't want to say Zimbabwe's correct in taking back their land, but they knew economically, how can you develop? And so in Africa, they want to try to destroy Zimbabwe to send a message to South Africa that, you know what? If you're going to deal with land reclamation, it's going to be on our terms. And what terms can they be when somebody comes to your country and takes not only the land for resources and agriculture, but culture? Because culture comes off of the land. So it's not just a question of taking the land, it's to destroy the culture, because culture is the basis of our resistance.
Thank you so much.
But also, it has an effect in the immediate region. So the damage that's done to Zimbabwe has an effect because Zimbabwe is part of a region called the South African Development Community. And they have projects that they get funded for, get help for, that Zimbabwe is a part of. But because Zimbabwe cannot participate in the international market, anyone that tries to develop through the international market, through the banking system, gets knocked out by the United States. So it not only restricts Zimbabwe, but it undercuts the work that SADC's trying to do to develop as a community, because SADC is a reflection of understanding that eventually Africa is one, it's a continent, and it needs to be working together. These regional conferences are examples of that. So it has concrete effect in terms of undermining what SADC is doing in terms of regional development.
Jared Bone, that makes what I like. I'm wondering if anybody could speak more to the connection between specifically Black America and this issue with Zimbabwe and the continent. In other words, why should DC residents or anybody else, Africans in this country, be concerned? There's a lot of people going to see this and be like, what does it have to do with us?
I would like to say that as we see here in DC, we're from New York, but in DC the same thing is happening, the ethnic cleansing of our community. And we need to see that it's the same fight here that we have here, because we're being ethnically cleansed in our communities, and that's what Zimbabwe, they came and they tried to take their land and stuff like that, but the Zimbabweans fought with armed struggle and self-determination and took back their land. So we must see Zimbabwe as the example, because we are being moved on here in America. Clearly we know that America was built on the backs of black people. So we need to be clear on that, see Zimbabwe as the example, and see how the sanctions are the same example of the oppression that we face every single day here in the United States. Us getting shot down in the streets, them putting lead in our water, us being miseducated. It's the same oppression done by the same hand. The same hand that has the sanctions on Zimbabwe is the same hand that is oppressing us here in America. So we must stand together as one united black nation.
So specifically, what I think is also important, in addition to what was previously said, is that this is Washington, D.C. There are a lot of sisters and brothers from the continent that are here, a lot of sisters and brothers who are going to be here from Zimbabwe. And so what we see in terms of DACA, a lot of folks being deported, a lot of the immigration issues are important, because we have a lot of people who identify as Zimbabwe Americans. And those sanctions directly impact them. And the sisters and brothers here in D.C. have to work with some of these sisters and brothers. They may be friends with someone, they may go to school with them, and to see somebody snatched up out of your classroom that you're working on a project with. This has the conversation sometimes is real broad, but in terms of specifics and how it impacts you in day-to-day life, your next door neighbor, somebody who may be somebody that you go to school with, that you go to church with, could be somebody from Zimbabwe, and that person could then be just snatched up and thrown in a concentration camp somewhere, and then their children could be on the other side of the country somewhere. So we see those kinds of things that are happening. But more specifically, that we should also take into consideration is that the same things that are done in other places, that are tried and tested in other places, are done here to us. And when we don't have that relationship, we say, okay, well, that's just them over there. No, it's never just them over there. It might be them today, but it might be us tomorrow. And that's the thing that we have to understand. But most importantly, also being here in the United States, capital city, the citadel of white supremacy, we have to be the vanguard for our sisters and brothers abroad. They're looking at us to be able to take the stand in a position, because we are right here. If we don't do it right here, no, I'm not talking about New York, Chicago, LA, I'm talking about right here in Washington, D.C. We have a responsibility to be on the forefront, to be in these spaces that they can't be. It takes resources to get from here to LA or from Nebraska to here. So we got to be on the front lines for our sisters and brothers and be able to speak for our people on the international level right here, be the conduit for that information.
The other thing I was going to say was, and I think this is very important for our brothers and sisters, D.C., New York, around the country to see. Zimbabwe is an instruction for us. It's an instruction in organization, commitment, and the will to win. The Zimbabwean people fought Chimarangas. They're shown a word for war. Their war of liberation not only defeated the colonists, but also they had to fight a civil war to build internal unity in the country. They came out of that. Then they came to the question that people remember, for 10 years, they had a willing selling, willing buyer. The West, as they always lie, said, we will compensate you for the land so it could be paid for. That was a lie. For 10 years, they sat on that peacefully. Willing selling, willing buyer, the money to pay the white farmers for the land. Not the improvements, the land itself. They reneged on that. The people of Zimbabwe said, we did not go to war. We did not fight a national liberation war for a parliament. We fought it for our land. And so therefore they set out on the question of land reclamation, and they took it back. And the people and the government and their unity returned millions of hectares of land to the people. There's a lesson there. That means there's no perfect straight line. There's internal contradictions. There's struggle. There's conflict. But the People's Party, ZANU-PF, has led the Zimbabwean people along a journey. And right now, they are as unified and as strong as ever. It is perseverance these 2 decades have kept the people from not falling to sanctions and regime change. We're part of the Zindira Zimbabwe Democracy Act, is to support the buildup of an opposition to make their economy scream and make the people beg for a different leadership and a different land policy. The people have resisted that because of the journey of organization, the journey of a party. Those are the lessons for us. The lessons of how do you build unity? How do you resolve conflict? How do you struggle to come out of it stronger than you went into it? Those are the lessons for us in DC. Those are the lessons for us in New York. Those are the lessons across the black diaspora of building unity. That's the greatest weapon we have, is unity. Straight ahead.
I wanted to add to that Brother Omawale talked about the statement by Stephen Biko that the greatest weapon in the mind of the oppressor, the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Zimbabwe is important because it dispels a lie, it exposes a lie. Just as we're here in the African American Civil War Veterans Museum, that exposes a lie. That history exposes a lie that black people did not resist. We fought for our freedom from slavery. It was not given to us. It was not handed down by Abraham Lincoln. We fought for that. So that's part of us dispelling the lie that keeps us feeling that we're obligated to white folks. Zimbabwe similarly dispels the lie of the fact that African people do not resist, do not assert their independence, do not stand up to colonialism and imperialism. And it's for all the reasons that these comrades have talked about, it's important for us to understand what Zimbabwe means and what it means for us here in terms of inspiration. It is a reciprocal struggle between what we do here and what goes on in the continent. All of the people who fought for liberation in the continent spoke about the inspiration that the black liberation struggle provided for them, the example it set. And so now we must draw on that in terms of our conditions here.
We want people to send the message out that this African Liberation Day, Saturday, May 25th at 12 o'clock, we will assemble at this historic spot, a spot that is also under attack. Because as they try to ethnically cleanse our neighborhood, how long can institutions that reflect our history last? So we say off the sidewalk, into the streets. 12 o'clock, the African American Civil War Museum at the plaza. This is where we'll be Saturday, May 25th. We want that word to go out.
I did just have one more question. If any of you, or one of you, could speak to the history briefly of African liberation in the context of that and its relationship to this?
A number of years ago, particularly when many of the African countries were still under colonialism, Brother Owusu Sadoki led a team of brothers and sisters from New York to go and visit the liberated areas in Mozambique. Of course, they couldn't actually be taken into the liberated areas because the fighting was going on. But they asked the brothers and sisters in Frelimo, what can we do to support you? They said, take the message back to the people in the United States. Let them know the battle that we're fighting. Let them know that we need their moral, political, and financial support. And they came back and they had a meeting in Frogmore, South Carolina, where they came together and said, on 1972, May 27, 1972, we will organize an African Liberation Day. It coincided with African Liberation Day on the continent, and that was the first one. And I think over 60,000 brothers and sisters came from all over the United States to make that significant statement. And from that statement came, and in San Francisco, there was another demonstration. There was one in the Caribbean in a few places, one in even Canada in a few places. But it was really the struggle to heighten the unity between African people. And from that came the African Liberation Support Committee. And during that support committee, brothers made material support, gave material support to brothers and sisters on the continent, to Frelimo, to PAIGC, to MPLA, to ZANU-PF, and ZAPU was in the field fighting, to the ANC, the PAC. The struggle was send the weapons, send the resources and finances to help them win liberation. And so therefore, we're looking at the benefit of that. We're looking at African countries that sought and got political independence. But as we see in Zimbabwe, and as Kwame Nkrumah said, seek ye first the political kingdom, and then must follow the economic kingdom. Because if the economic kingdom does not follow, the political kingdom cannot survive. And so we see the recolonization of our communities, the recolonization in Africa. And Zimbabwe stands as a fortress against that. A fortress. It's their land. It's their land. It's their land. And it was stolen. All they did was correct history. And for that, they're being punished. They're being punished daily. And I don't want to minimize, as the sister asked, what sanctions actually do. Because they're the atomic bomb and hydrogen bomb of the West. If you're a colonized country seeking now to develop, chart your own course as a sovereign nation, if the West attacks you and denies you international trade, that is a crime against humanity. If they deny you medicine, a crime against humanity. And the things that were stolen from those countries that they benefited from, they want to act like they belong to them. They don't. And so the lessons are very powerful. And I'm glad you asked. The history of African Liberation Day is something that we can never let touch the ground. We're an African people. We're an African people. And at the speech that Owusu said at the end, we are an African people. Straight ahead.
So we'll close the press conference formally now, but allow you, if you want, to have one-on-one with any of the speakers today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace and Black Power family. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Jade Arrindell right here at flynubianqueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. The press conference has wrapped up, but I do want to speak to this elder right here about the sanctions in Zimbabwe. Baba, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Brother Omawale Clay from the December 12th movement. We came for this press conference to send the word out that African Liberation Day is not dead, but it has to be focused. And it has to be focused at the greatest contradiction for African people. And on the continent, that is the struggle to defend Zimbabwe. And why are we defending it? Because it's under attack. For the past 2 decades, there have been sanctions put on the country. And for our brothers and sisters who oftentimes don't control cities, what it means, sanctions attacks the ability to provide food, clothing, and shelter to the people. There are certain things that are products of humanity. Science produces things that don't belong to an individual, they belong to the people. Those things are part of the people and should have access to. So when you deny Zimbabwe its ability to do international trade, to get international loans, it means they have to try to pay out of pocket, puts them further in debt. If you deny them agricultural chemicals that can help them in terms of agricultural growth, it then comes at the question of starving the people. And so all of these attacks, and one that's very important, is around culture. African culture. I listen to where you came from, sister, when you introduced yourself. But it's very important. How you look, how you wear, all of that's part of who we are. If you let them destroy our culture, then what are you struggling to free yourself from? If you believe that you're somebody else, if you want to look like somebody else and act like somebody else, you can never be those people.
Ever.
And if you knew who you were, you damn sure wouldn't want to be those people.
Right.
And we got a glorious history. There's only, the brother made a statement the other day about, there's almost like a censored generation where information hasn't passed and the conduit to that information hasn't passed. We got to go back and grab that. We got to let them know about this Civil War Museum. Them bold brothers, they fought for their freedom in terms of that. So we came to just say, come out, you know, off the sidewalk, off the sidelines, and into the street. We said, where's the fight gonna be? It's gonna be in the street. Where the people gotta be? In the street. So
yeah, I'm looking at the comments here. Once again, this is Jade Arrindell, your revolutionary, unapologetically black African host right here at flynubianqueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. And according to these comments, Baba, a lot of people didn't even know about these sanctions in Zimbabwe that have been going on, the fight that's been going on for 2 decades or over 2 decades now. What do you attribute that to, and how has white-owned mainstream media played a role in the narrative that the public is getting or not getting about Zimbabwe?
This out. American patriotism is really white nationalism. Let's just come clean on it. American patriotism is white nationalism. And they have a thing, what they call their kith and kin. The British were the ones who colonized Zimbabwe. When they took back the land, it first affected the British. But since they're kith and kin to the Americans, see, they stick together. The Zimbabwe Democracy Act, which we call the Anti-Democracy Act, was levied in support of the British to make the Zimbabwe economy scream, make the people beg to be forgiven for taking their own land. And so therefore, there's that unity among them. It's a unity in the West at the exploitation of African people. And so we say to folks that sanctions is hidden. See, they're very devious. Malcolm said there's a fox and a wolf. They come as a fox. Oh, sanctions are targeted. The other thing they say, oh, they're targeted towards certain people. You don't target sanctions towards certain people. The certain people you target are people in the government. How are sanctions going to affect them?
Right.
The question is, it affects the literal people who they want to destroy their will to win. That's what they've been doing right here in D.C.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to destroy our will to win, to have us turn on each other before we assemble and turn on our enemies in terms of that. So the sanctions really undermine a people struggle. That's why I said perseverance of the Zimbabwean people, strength. Same kind of strength you see in Cuba. Same kind of strength you see taking place right now in Venezuela. You know, the resistance to criminals, because that's what they are, criminals. Now, Trump, of course, is much clearer to us. But Trump is no different. Trump is not even the issue. Trump represents American foreign policy. He represents American domestic policy. And they're very clear about their thing. They're very clear about it. Keep the people confused, keep the people miseducated, recolonize the people. Look at D.C. We're on Avenue U. This was like the Black Belt.
You know, I'm
U?
from D.C., born and raised here. I live in Brooklyn now, but yeah, this is really interesting. It's ethnic cleansing to the max.
That's why we say gentrification is a disguised term. You don't even know what that is at first. And then they start interpreting it different ways. No, internationally, as Malcolm said, what is this? This is genocide. And one of the components of genocide is ethnic cleansing, not just of our places to live, not just of our businesses, but the attack on our culture. Suddenly, we're not here anymore.
Right.
It's like we were never here. Everything that was here. I look at them change these homes they renovate them. They keep the decor. You don't even know what, so if you let this continue, you won't even know black people existed here. You know, Avenue U was like the Black Belt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Georgia Avenue, that was the Nile.
Shoot.
That was the Nile. Remember that?
Right.
One more question, Baba, before I let you go. You mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus. You mentioned the CDC. You know, we have black people who, some of them I call Oreo cookies, that have been elected, that fall silent when it comes to issues about black and African people. What has been the resistance, to your estimation, of the Congressional Black Caucus to get involved in this issue?
I think they're Democrats. That's their first problem. That they actually believe they're Democrats. Listen to your audience. Every year at the Democratic Convention, and I'm even talking about the Republican, Democratic, they have a platform committee. They sit and meet for days and days to talk about a platform. You never hear about that platform after the election. Whatever policies and stuff they came up with, you never hear about it again. There's no platform. It's follow the leader. And who's the leader? Monopoly finance capitalism. Those are the ones who put money in their campaigns. In fact, a lot of people don't vote. So they don't have to spend a lot of money.
Right.
So when we look at our black people, that's why I said, in the spirit of Ron Dellums, in the spirit of Charles Diggs, who was at the first African Liberation Day, May 27th, 1972.
Wow.
Charles Diggs was there, and he spoke about the question of South Africa and Southern Africa and exploitation. But I'm so sorry. There was a delegation of the Congressional Black Caucus that went to Zimbabwe to do an analysis of what's come back.
Research.
And all they did was come back and say the same thing that the American government was saying. Because one, they're confused about who they are, and two, they're Democrats. And they think the biggest question for them is to get the Democrats back in office.
Right.
But I'll say this to you, since they're using reparations as a campaign slogan now, none of them mean it. They want to use it because they think black people are too stupid to understand that they have no interest in reparations. But I tell you this, there was a time when the Democrats controlled the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress, and a black man controlled the Judiciary Committee. They never even brought the reparations up for a vote.
Wow.
See, so we're not going to be played. We're not going to be played. We're going to step to the Congressional Black Caucus because they have a responsibility. And if they don't want to do that gig, I'm all for full employment. They should have a job, but don't have a job that blocks our people from sharpening our understanding of what's going on. They should be educating our people about what's going on as opposed to follow the leader.
Right.
As opposed to follow the leader. Our sister Omar from Minnesota, she said, I didn't come to Washington to be quiet. I came here to speak.
Yeah.
To speak the interests of what's going on. That frightens them. That frightens them. But first thing you have a responsibility to do is tell the truth. And so we're going to step to them, and we've always stepped to them, because people are dying in Zimbabwe. It is a humanitarian crisis in Zimbabwe, and they deserve our support because they took the point. They took the point on taking the land back. Nowhere in the history of the African world have brothers and sisters done that contemporarily. We remember Toussaint and Dessalines and Henri Christophe. But in this world, Zimbabwe takes the point. We got your back.
Yes, Baba. And what's the call to action? What do you want the people to do?
I want them to be here and meet me here.
Where's
in the
that?
plaza of the African American Civil War Plaza, across from the museum,
DC.
at 12 o'clock, Washington, D.C., 12 o'clock. All roads lead here to serious black people who speak to what you spoke to, sister. Serious African people who are clear about what has to happen. 12 o'clock, Saturday, May 25th, right here on this plaza. Brothers are coming from out of the city, right here. D.C., be represented, and we don't march on the White House. And send that message to our CBC. To our CBC, it's time to be black again.
Oh, it's time for the Baba said it's time for the Congressional Black Caucus to be black again. This is Jade Arrindell, your revolutionary, unapologetically black African host right here at FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women and some men like you. And before I let you go, tell us your name again and where we can follow you, where we can find you.
Follow me.
We'll follow you into the revolution in the streets,
that's
right?
right. Follow me in the streets. You know what I mean? If the social media ain't putting you in the streets, it's putting you to sleep.
Woo.
If it ain't putting you in the streets, it's putting you to sleep. So follow us at December 12th has a website, December D12M. They can go there. What's our?
At AOL.com.
At AOL.com.
And we have our Sister's Place. We have that as our Instagram, and we also have In Sanctions on Zimbabwe.
Okay.
That's our Instagram.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm about to get this sister right quick. Let's talk. Let's talk. All right, y'all see. So I'm sure y'all are tuned in. I see people in the house. I'm gonna turn this way, okay? Once again, this is Jade Arrindell, right here at FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking this video. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to our text message alerts. That's text the word Queens to 31996. That's Queens to 31996. Also, we're talking about collective economics and community building. Make sure you go over to FlyNubianBusiness.com and also FlyNubianMoney.com so we can pool our money and resources and learn how to make our money grow so we can create strong black economies. So, sis, tell me your name. I heard you speak. I was so inspired.
Oh, okay. I'm inspired by like the melanated women piece. I love it. I love what you're doing.
Thank
so
you.
keep it going. And my name is Iman Essayed, and I'm a youth division leader of the December 12th movement.
All right, and so what is the December 12th movement? A lot of folks may not know.
Well, we're a human rights organization fighting for the liberation of black people. We obviously fight here in America for our liberation, and obviously internationally as well, because it is a nationhood, fight that we're fighting.
Awesome. And so, how did you get involved with this fight to end sanctions in Zimbabwe, and what would have been your major learnings and takeaways from this movement?
Well, that was some of the major political work before you. Obviously, my predecessors and stuff like that, they've been fighting this for a long time. And when I joined the December 12th movement, that was one of the things, that was some of the first work that I did as a member of the December 12th movement was fight for the lifting of the sanctions. You know what I'm saying? We went to the UN, we had our march and stuff like that. And it's very important for us, like youth, us young people, to have an understanding of what's going on the continent, because we're the same people and it's the same exact fight. And as I said earlier, is that Zimbabwe is the example. Zimbabwe is the example of the liberation that we need to do here in the United States, because they took their land back with armed struggle and self-determination. And we obviously see that, we are an oppressed people in the diaspora. So it is time for us to see Zimbabwe as the example, and for us to all fight for the lifting of the sanctions so that we can continue to fight for the liberation of the African diaspora.
Absolutely, thank you. And what would you caution the young people to do, and in your work with young people, how are you getting them motivated and educated on all things African?
Okay, well, personally, I actually I work in the shelter system in New York City, and I teach culture because I'm an artist and I come from an art background. I come from a background of artists and stuff like that. So what I use is art as a lens to teach history, culture, and things like that. So I just think that we need to use whatever giftings that we have, and I use art because that's my gifting. I use art as a tool to teach liberation. I teach my students about Cuba. I teach my students about Venezuela. I teach my students about Zimbabwe, and I teach them about their blackness, their Africanness. I teach them all the things that need to be taught, because we, as I said earlier, we are being miseducated in this system. So I think that we as young people need to understand our oppression. We can't go to sleep. We can't look to Instagram and look to Beyonce and Jay-Z and try to aspire to be them. No, let's try to aspire to be free. Let's try to aspire to be liberated, because the reality is we oppressed. Because if we wasn't oppressed, then we wouldn't be getting shot down in the streets and no justice being served. If we wasn't oppressed, then there wouldn't be lead in our water and nothing happening. If we wasn't oppressed, all these, we would actually feel true freedom. So let's move away from this false illusion of freedom that we think we have, this false American dream that we think that we're living, and let's really fight for our liberation so that we can truly experience what freedom is. And of course, going back to seeing Zimbabwe as the example, because they fought with armed struggle and self-determination.
Yeah, and they have unity.
They have unity.
That's what we need.
And we have to look in the Amilcar Cabral book, Unity and Struggle, because that's what it's going to take. Because as Omawali said earlier, they had their Shimarengas, and then they fought for their liberation, and there was also a civil war, because it's going to be that, but we have to see that it's going to be a struggle, but we have to be unified on it, because it's the same people, same fight.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you 100%, a million percent.
Yes.
Tell us how we can follow you on social media and stay in touch about this movement.
Well, yeah, definitely. Please follow In Sanctions on Zimbabwe. That's our Instagram page for that. Please follow It's a Black Thing open mic, because that's what we do out there in Brooklyn at Sister's Place. Please follow Sister's Place, and then you could stay in tune with all the things that we have going on in the December 12th movement. Awesome.
So yeah, I will, I'm in Brooklyn as well, so we'll connect offline.
Absolutely.
And I know Sister's Place as well.
Yes, please come through.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you so very,
Thank
very
you.
much.
I love your platform. I love what it stands for, because Black women definitely need a platform, because
Thank you. Yeah, it's a bunch on here. It's a bunch of queens at flynubianqueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. I'm one contributor, so make sure you subscribe.
And subscribe.
Yes, and also audience, make sure you like, share, subscribe, because we're bringing. Yes, I've been to Sister's Place. I'm very familiar with Sister's Place.
She's gonna come to Brooklyn. She's gonna come to the first Friday of Black open mic. She's gonna come to our jazz on Saturdays.
I know, I'm definitely coming.
That's right.
I was definitely. Some of our audience may know I was on with Bob Law on the streets, and we broadcast from Sister's Place about a month ago. So I'll be back on with the elder this Saturday, but I may be doing it from down here, because there's work to do down in DC as well. So I'm definitely going to connect. And before I go, I see my good friend, the commissioner here, who is the president of NBUF, the National Black United Front. Brother Salim, you want to wave to flynubianqueen.com, the network for melanated women and some men like you?
Peace.
All right, so we're gonna head out. Thank you so much, family, for tuning in. This is Jade Arrindell. Again, I'm wrapping up this segment. Make sure you go over and subscribe to flynubianqueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. This broadcast is ending, but this fight is going to continue. So while this broadcast is ending, so is global white supremacy and racism. In order for us to slew this beast, we will carry with us fortitude, preparedness, and collectivism. Until next time, family, peace and Black power.
All right.